Thank you for joining me on A Quilting Tale today. My name is Shaylin, and this video is all about the progress on some new quilts that I've started. So you may have seen back in October, I did a progress video showing you some tops that were finished and some quilts that were in the works. And so I'm not going to touch on those. Some of them are further along. I did get 3 of my finished tops quilted, and I'm in the process of binding those, so I'll share those in another video. But this one, I want to focus on new projects that I'm starting that I haven't shared yet. And I actually made a little check-off sheet of all the quilts and the steps to finishing them, because some are sew-alongs and block of the months, and so I'm keeping track of those. And so I'm definitely far from one project at a time, which is nice because it keeps me from feeling bored with a project, and I can just work on whatever I feel like sounds good that day. But it does mean that it will take a while for some of these to get finished, but that's fine by me. I will keep sharing how they're coming along. So if you're wondering about the extravaganza quilt that I shared before, I'll make sure to share how it's coming along in future videos. And the Farmer's Wife sampler quilt, I'm still making videos with those blocks using the letters from the actual Farmer's Wife magazine. So I hope if you haven't seen those, you tune into those. They're very encouraging and the blocks are beautiful. And so if you have been watching those, I hope that they've been enjoyable for you. But this video, like I said, is going to focus on new projects that I haven't been sharing. So the first one that I'm going to share about is Knitted Blooms. The pattern is by Lo Behold Stitchery, and there's currently a sew along going on with it. I am behind, but that's okay. I'm in week 2, and I think they're in week 4 or 5 now. So I'm still assembling my mini block units if you're participating in that. But I thought I'd just share some of the progress. I'm not going to be doing in-depth tutorials because the creators of these patterns have already done that. So I just want to show you some of the process, and any little tips that I've figured out along the way, I'll be sure to share those. But let's take a look at the fabrics I selected and how the Knitted Blooms quilt is coming along. Before I show you the fabric colors I selected, I wanted to share my inspiration for these colors. I got this t-shirt last summer visiting Custer State Park in South Dakota, and I was just drawn to this kind of retro color palette here against this really dark charcoal background. And so I thought I would choose solids that match these colors. There are 5 in the circle here. There's this sort of vanilla color, this pinkish lavender, a sky blue, there's orange, and then there's this buttery yellow. So those were the ones I really wanted to get, and I brought this t-shirt into my local quilt shop. Now I'm doing the large throw, which requires 20 fat quarters. If I got 5 1-yard cuts, I'd have 5 yards and could do these 5 colors, and that would work out just right. But I decided I wanted a few more colors just to have more options to mix and match. So I ended up throwing in a couple extra colors. So let me show you what I picked out. And these are not all from the same manufacturer. I didn't get, for example, all Kona or all Bella solids. I just tried to pick the closest matches I could find. And I will pop up the names of these and the manufacturer if I have it. I did take pictures of the bolts. So there's my orange and my match to the pinkish lavender, a soft yellow, a sky blue, and that vanilla color. So I thought these were excellent matches. And then I got my backing fabric, which is a really deep charcoal color, not quite black. And then, like I said, I wanted to add in a few more pops of color, so I was just holding up some solids to all these bolts, and I decided I liked this one, which is reading a little more blue on the camera, I'm noticing. In real life it's more of an aqua green, so maybe in different lighting later this will appear differently. And then I got this kind of bright coral color. It's a little more pink than my orange, but I just thought these looked great together, and they stuck with that bright theme. And so I ended up getting a yard of these 5 colors, which is truly all I would need, but like I said, I wanted some variety, and I did a half yard of these 2. So those are all my colors and my background, and so I'm going to work on week 1 of this quilt along, which is to cut and mix and match the fabrics. The first thing I'm going to do is cut my yardage into fat quarters, because that's what all the cuts are based on. And so I'm doing the twin size quilt, and it wants 20 fat quarters. So I'm going to take first my pieces that I got a half yard of. Those ones will be easy enough to do. A fat quarter is basically a half of a half yard. So right now I have my half yard folded selvage to selvage. That's how it came in the shop. So if I just unfold it, I'm going to look for that halfway crease here, and I'm not going to be too concerned about measuring it exactly, but I know just cutting it in half will get me that half quarter. And if you measure, usually a fat quarter is 18 by 22. I have about 18.5 inches when I measure, so some shops might be a little more generous, but really it's just halfway between selvage to selvage that you want to cut. So I'm just going to go right on that fold line. And I've got my 2 half quarters now. And I find that usually they go a little past 22 inches because you have your selvage edges to the unusable part. So it should be around 22 usable inches. I have those 2 ready. I'm going to do this kind of turquoise color. I don't know if it's turquoise or aqua. We'll do the same. Now, if they didn't look folded in half exactly, I would take the time to measure. But if the selvages look lined up, I would just cut in half like this. And art gallery fabrics, yeah, it goes about to 22.5 when you include the selvage on there. To make fat quarters out of my 1 yard cuts, I'm just going to have to make 2 cuts. So first I'll open it so that I have the yard out in front of me, and my cutting mat is for 36 inches, so I can see it's just a little over 36 inches here, so I got just a tad bit extra. I'm going to double check when it's folded in half that that fold line is the halfway mark. And so right here, I'm just going to put a crease in it. I've got my selvage edges all together, my raw edges lined up top, so I'm just going to make sure that the crease is really obvious here. And if there was another original crease and they're not in the same spot, then I would just measure to make sure that I'm cutting the right fold line. I want these to be as equally sized as possible. I'm going to align one of the lines of my ruler along the fold up here and cut. And so now I have the half yard that I already demonstrated. So I'll open it up, cut along that fold line. Again, You can double check that they are the same size, that they are folded evenly. I saw that these ones were. And now I have a fat quarter. Fat quarters always have one end with a selvage, and sometimes it has the information about the line, sometimes it's just solid and blank. With a lot of these solid color fabrics, they're all going to just be blank, but you can clearly see the selvage edges. So with all my yardage, I should end up with 24 fat quarters, and I only need 20. So I'll just mix and match and pick out the colors that I want, and then I'll just cut according to the diagrams. I have my 20 fat quarters selected. I decided to use all 4 of the purpley pinks and then 3 of the remaining 1 yard cuts, and then the 2 half yard cuts only gave me 2 each. So those are my 20. I've got 4 beautiful colors left over, a fat quarter of each, so I'll save those for something else. But now I'm going to start cutting my pieces so I can mix and match these colors. My fat quarters for cutting, and I'll do the same thing with my background yardage as well. I'm going to best press everything. And I like fat quarters, are just smaller and easy to work with on the ironing board. So I'll just let that sit for a moment and soak in. And I'm pressing on my wool mat, which is on top of my ironing board, while this is soaking. Normally when I cut yardage, I cut my strips just a little bigger, like a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch bigger, so then I have an easier time prepping it. But because there are so many cuts to make, I don't want to lose that many 1/4 inches and run the risk of over cutting too much. You know, if it's a 1/4 inch, I probably won't lose too much, but if it's more than that, I just feel like I might trim off too much and not have enough. So having not done this pattern before, I want to be a little more on the frugal side with the fabric to make sure I have enough. So same thing when I start cutting into these fat quarters, I'll start with a color that I have a spare of, because you saw I had 4 extra ones. So I'll pick one of those colors to start with, just in case I find I come up short and need to make some adjustments, like if I trim off too much when I square it up. That'll just give me some feedback to know I need to adjust. Because looking at the diagram of how to cut up the fat quarters, it looks like just about all of it's going to be used. So once each fat quarter is all ironed out, I'm just going to lay it on a flat surface to keep it nice and crisp and ready for cutting. I'm going to take a break from cutting and hold off on cutting the background, but I have all my fat quarters cut up to the sizes that I need, and I thought I would just work on the color combinations now, because that's one of my favorite parts, and cutting is one of my least favorite parts, so I thought this would be a good time to take a break and start making some color combinations. So I'm just going to follow the pattern directions, and I have them bundled by numbers that the direction said to do of each color with each fat quarter. And so I'm just going to pull according to the pattern directions, and I'll line the edges up on one side just to make them easier to clip later on. And I think I will do these long strips. And then I need a few squares to match the long strips. And flower centers. And I will just clip them like so to keep them together. They'll all have the same background fabric, so I don't need to add those to the mix right now. But I'm just going to keep going. It's nice to arrange them all this way ahead of time rather than sew them one at a time, just to make sure you have a good mix of colors and you don't end up with all of the same colors in the end. So sorting them out like this is one of my favorite parts of the process, just playing with the different combinations, rearranging if needed. So I'm just trying to get a variety of combinations, and I'll try to avoid putting colors that don't have as much contrast together. For example, I have this orange and this coral color. I'll avoid putting those together, but most of the others I think would be fine if they were combined. This is my first attempt at the combos, so I grouped them by the majority of the fabric and then the small flowers and flower center pieces on top. And so I think there's a really good mix in here. The only one I think I need to change is this one because there's two yellow on the purple. These are different, but I'm going to just attempt to switch it up a little more. Okay, here are my final combos. And so now I'm going to put these aside and cut my background fabric. Now all my background pieces are cut, and it's time for week 2, which is assembling the small flower units. Since I'm doing the modern version, I'm just going to work on one block at a time, making the flower units. I'll get some background pieces, get my flower centers, and just save the rest of these for later. And then I'll need some background squares, and I'm going to be making 4 small flower units for each block because they're the corner pieces of the block. Save the rest of those for later. So these are all the pieces that I'll need for making my corner small flower units. So I'm going to go ahead and make some strip sets so I can subcut and start assembling the small flower units. I'm going to try to follow Brittany's advice from Lo Behold Stitchery. She is the pattern designer and owner of the Lo Behold company. And so I shortened my stitch length to 2.0 to help hold these strip pieces together. I don't usually press my seams open if I can help it, but she said because of all the small pieces and all the folding over that the seam allowances will create that extra bulk if you press them to one side. So I'm going to take her advice and press open. I'm also using a scant 1/4 inch, just being really mindful of doing that because there will be so much folding over, and just the folding over of the seam, that little roll of the fabric over the thread, she was saying, can start adding up when you have so many little pieces. So I'm going to make sure I do the scant 1/4 inch. She also recommended using the flatter spray to help get the seams really flat, and I had purchased this about 2 years ago. It smells amazing. This is the Pineapple Grove scent, and I've just been real sparse with it because I don't want to waste it. And so since this quilt has so many seams and small pieces, I thought I would go ahead and use it on here. So my sewing space is going to smell great, and I'm just going to use it for all of these strip piece units. And I'll also use the clapper, and I'm going to measure as I go to make sure that the new lengths and widths of the units, as I'm making them, measure what the pattern says, because I know that a little bit here and there being off will add up to more, and I want these blocks to be as precise as possible. Alright, so now I'm going to subcut. I'm just going to take a little off the edge to clean it up, and then cut my pieces according to the pattern size. So I'm just going to find a line to line up to the center. And then I'll just start cutting pieces. And this might be a good place to use my Stripology ruler, but I just want to make sure that my pieces are perfectly straight, not going crooked or anything. So I noticed that my pieces were just a tad, not even a 1/4 inch, maybe like a 1/16 of an inch taller than they need to be, which is fine because I can still trim them down. But that tells me that I was going a little too scant. So I can make my seams a tiny bit bigger. So with my initial little trim and then what was left, there's not a whole lot left over for this strip. There's a little bit of wiggle room. So now I'm going to build my blocks. I'm using my small little rotating cutting mat because I can take it with me to the sewing machine. So I'm just making sure my background color is to the outside, and then I'll have my squares in the corners. And so I can't do all my small flower units at once because I'm doing the modern version where there's a mix, but I can do 4 at once. So I can put all 4 of my centers and put four total for each of the strip units. And actually I had already made piles of 4, so I'm just going to put those back and then get my other piles of 4. And so I can at least chain piece 4 units at a time. So I'll just sew in rows and connect and press everything open. So as I was sewing these first pieces together, I made sure to backstitch any edges that will be on the perimeter of the block. Again, just to keep things from unraveling. That was another great tip from Brittany. I have experienced what she's talking about, where the edges that you handle the most can start to unravel a bit, and you have to restitch them or hope they don't unravel too far to not be caught in the 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to keep pressing these open. I'm going to trim some of them because some of my pieces you can see poke out just a little bit from that scant 1/4 inch, so I'm going to make sure they're nice and accurate. These are my bottom pieces, top and middle, so I'm just going to keep them separate, and I'll show you the finished units next. Another tip that I'm making sure to follow is to pin, especially those long skinny pieces, to make sure they're not shifting around. I'm just making sure I use plenty of pins, whereas sometimes I might just hold them in place. Just going to see how much of a difference all these tips make. My first set of small flower units are done for my first block here, so I'm going to stop at this point as far as sharing the progress on this. So the next time I do a progress video, I will hopefully have lots more of these made, but I'm just going to keep them with the rest of the block that it'll go with. Just keep them pinned there, but they're all trimmed down, and yeah, they look really nice. They're really flat on the back, and so yeah, I'm just liking how they're coming together. I also joined a block of the month through My Sew Quilty Life. Heather Briggs has designed the 2025 Year of Sewing Machines quilt, and so every month there is a sewing machine block. The sewing machines are all different styles, and they are sewing a block that's kind of coming off of the sewing machine. And so far I've seen January through March, and they have all been adorable. I have only done January so far, so I'll show you that block. As for the fabric I'm using, I'm just trying to use my stash and what I think looks good together. So I think I'll pull in some reds because that's nice for Valentine's Day and Christmas, and it's just a quilt color that I enjoy. So I think I'll choose fabrics that would look nice with reds and probably some navies. I like those colors, aquas perhaps. And so I'm not pulling all my fabric at once. This is going to be one where I just kind of pull from my stash each time I'm ready to make a block and compare that fabric to the blocks I've already sewn and just see, does it look good together? Do I think it's cohesive? And that's how I'm going to go with it. So not a big fabric plan for this one, but let me show you how January turned out. These are the fabrics I'm going to use for my January sewing machine block. So for all my white backgrounds for all the blocks, I'm going to use this Bella PFD, just solid white. I have a scrap of this dark slate gray for my needle, And then the sewing machine body will be this tilde print. The accents will be this really light minty color, and it'll also be the trim of the mitten, the main mitten color. And then this is a tone on tone. It's probably doesn't show up well on the camera, but it has the little eyelet pattern. Maybe I can show it like that. Just the white on white there. And it's a coriander seeds. And then all of the blocks will have this brown for the little shelf that the sewing machine will be on. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this into the block. I started by cutting the pieces to the 6-inch block, which will make the mini quilt that's part of the larger block. And it makes this sweet little mitten. I love how it turned out. It has the solid white fabric for the tree and then that white on white for the background of the mitten. One of the nice things about Heather's pattern is if you don't want a seasonal mini quilt block, she provides the traditional star blocks. There's a different one each month available as well. I'm not going to show the entire process of making the large block with the sewing machine, but here's just making the little dial on the sewing machine with these small pieces. There are a lot of pieces. It goes from A to Z in the alphabet and then from double A to double E. So a lot of the pieces, there's just one or two that you need for that cut. But it comes together quickly. I think cutting takes the longest time, but then you quickly start to see the machine coming together. So here's the side of the machine with the wheel on the end. This is part of the table that the sewing machine will sit on coming together. So I'm just making sure my points are nice and sharp and that this is flat. And finally, putting it all together, just putting the little sashing piece on the block. That gives the sewing machine its shape at the top. Here's my finished January sewing machine with its mini mitten quilt here. I just love how this turned out. I don't usually use green a whole lot, especially as the dominant color, but this one's just very soothing to me. I love the little houses in here. I tried to make sure they were all going directionally, so I was careful with cutting. Sometimes I had to rotate the fabric to get the houses going in the direction I want. If I were to do this again, I would choose a white mini quilt background that had more contrast to my main white background. This one is the tone on tone, but just from afar it kind of looks like the machine is just cut off. I don't know if it has the effect of a quilt draping down from the machine. So just going forward in the future, I'm going to make sure that whatever background I use on the mini quilt block has more contrast with the solid white background. But overall, it is just a really lovely block. It finishes at 16.5 inches square. So it's a pretty large block, and by the time we get all 12 of them together, this will be a nice size quilt. So stay tuned to see more in future videos. I'll show you more months as I make them. This next one I'm so excited for because I had such a good experience last year, and that is the 2025 Brown Bag Mystery by Karen Montgomery. This year's theme is called Dealer's Choice. And so just like before I showed in my October video, you get a little sneak peek of some of the fabric inside a brown bag, and you select the bag based on that. And then the fabrics are a mystery. The first clues will be mailed on March 15th. So if this is something you're interested in participating in, there's still time to get a mystery bag. There are several symposium shops in the United States and in Canada that sell these bags. I ended up buying one online this time because the shop I got it from last year closed their brick and mortar store. And so I just was browsing a bunch of different participants' brown bags online, just seeing the little samples that were on the bags. And so I picked one from Michigan. And so I'm going to open that bag and show you what's in it, so you'll get to find out with me. There are cutting instructions that should be included with it to help me get started for some pieces. But then, like I said, every 2 weeks, starting March 15th, a new clue will come in the mail and I will build this mystery quilt as I go. So I'm hoping to stay relatively caught up with it, but because it's a mystery and I don't want to spoil surprises for anyone, even if I am caught up, I will probably delay showing the progress on that until I feel like people have had a chance to do their own bag. So let's not delay any longer and see what came in my bag. All right, I'm ready to find out what's in this bag from Bittersweet Quilt Shop and Home Decor, based in Michigan. I ordered online this time, and I had just started cutting open the bag when I realized I hadn't hit record on my camera. So I did cut it open, but I have not opened the brown bag yet. So one of the things that I did order along with it was the border kit, and these are optional for a coordinating border if you want your quilt to be bigger. So I have this teal color here. On the other side here I have the Tilda Sunday Brunch fabric in that kind of teal colorway. And so it says this kit includes first small border and binding fabric and second large border fabric. And so it looks like it gives some directions about sizes and what size borders these will be. So all I'll need to buy is the backing when I'm ready for this. So this I knew what the border would look like. But now is the time for the surprise. Let's see how the brown bag is packaged. Oh, and this is really sweet. It came with a little note and a seam ripper. I want to share the main fabric here that's going to be the bigger border, because this is really the fabric that drew me to this kit, knowing that this was the border option. Let's see if I can, it's a bigger piece here, so I'll open it wide to try and show the whole thing. But I just love the images on this, the ladies in their dresses just napping and having brunch in the garden, like just the little kitties and the music. It just is such a nice, peaceful looking scene. And so I have seen this line and wasn't sure, what kind of quilt I could make with it. I didn't want to buy a bunch of the Tilda fabric, not knowing what project I'd use it in. And so when I saw it was offered in a Brown Bag Mystery, I thought I would give it a try here, because I was so happy with last year's, that being my first year doing this. So yeah, I think this will be great. And let's take a look at the fabrics now, the mystery fabrics that go with it. So this was the only clue that I had for what the fabric would look like in the bag, and hoping that it coordinates well with this print, which I knew was from the Tilda Sunday Brunch collection. It's a collection that I've had my eye on since it came out. So let's find out what's in here. Okay, so this is nice that they're labeled. I have some solids, it looks like. I have fabric E, fabric D, fabric C, so far just solids. There's fabric B, nice floral, and then the main fabric, like on the front, fabric A. So I think these will be really pretty together, kind of subdued colors with a little pop of yellow. I think I'm really gonna like that. This is a really nice color palette, not like any quilts that I've made so far with the yellow and the teals. Yeah, no matter what the pattern turns out to be, I think this is going to be a really serene, calm looking quilt. These colors look great together. I love the pop of yellow with the dresses and the little floral that's also from the Sunday brunch line. Just ties in with the colors coming out of the gazebo and the little hanging lanterns. I just love the scenery in this fabric. It's gonna be a beauty, I can tell. Another quilt that I have started is the High Tea Crochet Fusion quilt, and I did a video on that one recently that goes into more depth about it, but I will just briefly touch on it if you want to see more about it. I'll link that video. But this one is a project I'll be doing with my mom because she is a crocheter and she'll be doing the crochet portion of this quilt. So I am still in the process of blanket stitching my way through 120 squares and trading them back and forth with her. So I can share kind of a picture of what the crocheted squares look like so far. I haven't blocked them, which is just getting them to lay flat, but that will be what I do when I get the squares back from her. Fanny Lu Design, who created this pattern, has excellent step-by-step tutorials in the form of YouTube videos, and it's a free pattern. I'll link it below. So when I show videos on my progress on this quilt, it's not going to be a step-by-step tutorial. I'm just going to show you parts of the process, but the pattern designer did such a great job with the directions on her blog and including videos. There's just no need for me to rehash how to do it. So I will link that because I'd rather send you to her site to see the full process. You may be wondering about these little houses behind me. This is a free pattern from Fat Quarter Shop that they released in 2022. It's called Brick House, and I am just making blocks out of the leftover fabric from all the quilts that I've made in recent years. So this is going to be a sort of record quilt, and I still have several houses to make to catch up on it. So I've been holding on to the fabrics, keeping them together as I finish quilts. And so I'm trying to get through those too, so I can process the rest of the scraps and get them in my scrap bins. But I think this will be so much fun once it's all put together. And I don't know how many I'm going to make. I'm just going to keep going until I have what I think is a good large quilt. But I've just been putting them up here to remind me, make the brick house for it when you finish. So that's another project that I'll be working on this year. And I'm hoping to put this quilt together. I should have enough quilts to make brick houses for that I can finish it this year. There are two other quilts that are on my goal sheet to make for this year that I haven't started yet, but I thought I would share anyway, just because if you're interested, I will hopefully be sharing their progress in future videos this year. One is the Flower Stand Block of the Month quilt by My Sew Quilty Life, the same one who does the 2025 Year of Sewing Machine. So Heather Briggs has been making just adorable quilt tops. And so I have the fabric for that. I have all the directions for that. So I do want to start on that too. I'll be using Dainty Meadows for the fabric line for that quilt. And I shared that in my last progress video, all the fabrics that I'll be using and my plan for that. So it is still a goal to throw that in the mix as well. Another project that I'm about to start is the Chatsworth Quilt by Doug Leko. And so you can see a close-up of this beautiful quilt. I'm going to be using fabrics that I've been saving up to make this quilt for my husband. I've been collecting kind of outdoorsy and fishing themed fabric for several years, and I think I have enough to make it now. So there's 12 different blocks, and they are, like I said, all different, and then they all get this border put around them that has this taupe accent and these star points. And then there's also these braided flying geese. And so to help me with those, I got the braided flying geese foundation papers, and they're pretty large, each one. But I think using these papers will just make them so precise and lovely. And so it comes with 50 sheets, and I believe there are 48 in here. So that will be just perfect. And so I thought I would show you the fabric. So this was created to be a block of the month, but I'm just going to make them just at my own pace here, hopefully sooner than one a month. But I picked out, like I mentioned, just some kind of outdoorsy fabric, fishing themed fabric, and then lots of plaids. This one has Smokey the Bear in it. And I brought these 5 fabrics into the quilt shop to pick an accent fabric. So the taupe here is the accent fabric, and it's also the binding. And so after placing these on several different colors, I opted for this blue. It's called Cadet, and it's a Riley Blake solid. And so I thought it would look nice with the assortment of fabrics I've been collecting. Now I probably won't use all of these. Some I don't think go as well as others, but I just have an assortment of fly rods, rocks. Some of these might be a little too big, the scale, like of the fish here, but I love the colors. More rods, and then I thought this old newsprint looking fabric with the little creel trout basket there, tackle boxes, those are all cute. I think I got it in this darker print too. But yeah, there's just lots of it. Pine cones, ferns, little pine needles. And then I had made an ancestry quilt for my husband several years ago with a layer cake, and these are the pieces that are left. And so I figured I could incorporate more of those into it too. So I have lots of fabrics to work with. So this is going to make a 74 by 88 inch throw. So a nice large kind of cuddle on the couch size throw. And you can see in the directions, I kind of do one block at a time, followed by the block setting, which will be the accent color and the little points around it, and then the braided flying geese, and then the layout. So what I think I'm going to do is when I do block 1, I'll do the setting with it, because I'm going to want coordinating fabrics, and I think it will just be easier to keep them together as I make the block instead of trying to find the coordinating pieces later. And then I'll also make one set of braided flying geese. So there'll be 4 braided flying geese per row. And so I'll just, there's 12 of those sets and 12 blocks. So I figure if I just do a block, the setting, and the 4 braided flying geese, by the time I finish the 12th block, I'll be ready for the row layout and assembly. So anyway, I think doing it in that order and going through that process will just keep it a little more interesting for me. So that will be coming up, something that I share in progress videos, or maybe I'll make some videos specifically working on this project, but just wanted you to see another one that's in the works for this year. So that's going to do it for now. I have my hands full this year getting through these projects, but I am so excited for all of them, and I love watching each of them come together and just planning the fabrics for them, and it's all fun. It's all things I look forward to. I don't feel overwhelmed by it, and I hope there's something you've seen in this video that makes you want to come back and see how it's going. If you liked this video, I always appreciate the thumbs up and subscribing to the channel so that you don't miss those future videos and seeing how these projects are coming along. I am so grateful for you watching and spending your time with me. And until next time, take care.